decided to take this project on, to decide that you were going to do a book? How did you decide that this warranted a book?
Okay, so what happened was, I started complaining about comments to a lot of my friends. And we went back and forth and back and forth, and it's like, oh, you should be more, thick-skinned and all that kind of stuff. I called up my friends and said, have you seen this? Have you been reading these comments? They're really bad. And at some point I tried to get them removed. Sometimes they were removed, but then 100 more would pop up. And so a friend of mine, Harry Allen, he said, you should do a book about this. And I'm like, nobody's going to read a book about comments. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And then some other friends said, he's actually right. You should do this book. And I was like, okay. So I dived in and I started reading comments like every day for several years. And I don't even know how I survived it, actually, because I basically immersed myself in racism online, the words of racism, and it was scary, and it depressed me, actually.
So here we are in 2016, and it seems that since you talked about this topic, it's really gotten overwhelming and really gotten bad. And I was wondering, how common do you see this? How much of it do you see now as compared to when you first started?
I would have to say that they were definitely worse, but then again, it was the shock value for me. So they probably are still as bad. It's only that they're being vetted, I'll say better, sort of. But it's still pretty rampant. I mean, newspapers and other websites have gotten new software to help with moderating the comments, but it's still pretty bad.
And so you were saying that it depressed you a little bit, and I wanted to hear more about the impact of reading all of these comments and the things that it did to you and what you've noticed it doing to other people.
So, you know me, and a lot of people in the audience probably know the types of stories that I write. The whole reason why I started writing back in 1990 was to write more positive stories about African Americans. That's what I did. That's what I still do. So when I started seeing these comments, the first thing I said to myself was, oh, are we this bad? It can't be. We can't be this bad. And it kind of deflated what I thought I was doing all this time. But in terms of how I felt, I think I'm forever changed. And for some people, they may be, well, get over it, they're just words, old words, it's no big deal. But to me, I took it personally. And it really was a big deal. It still is a big deal. I don't understand why this is happening and how it's been allowed, mainly.
What are you hearing about how it hurts other people, particularly young people?
Oh, with young people, let's talk about cyberbullying for a minute. This is part of it too. You have children killing themselves because of social media. We didn't have this before. I certainly didn't have to deal with it very much with my son. But now, all your business is just out there. And, it's embarrassing. And, we're powerless to stop it.
So here we are in 2016, and it seems that since you talked about this topic, it's really gotten overwhelming and really gotten bad. And I was wondering, how common do you see this? How much of it do you see now as compared to when you first started?
I would have to say that they would definitely...
Seeing these kinds of comments on Facebook and Twitter.
Absolutely.
Those things that you reviewed as well.
I looked at some of those. I primarily stayed within the confines of the news organizations because that's where we come from. But it's just as bad there. Even if you can post something on Twitter, you can take it down, but a million other people have probably already seen it and shared it, pinned it, all of that. Same thing with Facebook.
When I was working at AOL Black Voices, we had a bulletin board where there were all kinds of categories of topics, and the people would write into those topics, and the conversation always went downhill. And I know that also when I was at Essence.com, we had a book review, which would seem to be a pretty innocuous place for that kind of commenting. But I noticed that there it also went downhill. Is there a way that we can kind of bring the conversation back to a better level? Have you thought about that as well?
I've thought about it. I don't know how realistic that's going to be. I know the whole idea behind having comments was to promote, positive community feedback, and that's not what happened. Yeah, it didn't happen. I don't think it will, actually.
Well, I mean, we still have people say that the free flow of idea was the most important thing about the internet, but like you say, we're still seeing those negative comments. Is there any way that maybe we can pull something out of that from to allow us to move in another direction?
It's hard to say. People want to play in the sandbox, but if you're not going to play nice in the sandbox, I feel you have to take the sandbox away. Now, that's not the popular comment on comments. I don't think they're going away, but people just don't really listen. And as you know, comment moderators are far and few between. And yes, there are comment rating systems and there's software to try and help that, but at this point, I don't think it's worked as well. Although I will say that since 2008 to now, there have been some improvements.
So when you started collecting these comments or noticing and paying attention to these comments in 2008, which was also around the time of the presidential campaign for the first Black president and for Barack Obama. And so what did you notice about that campaign when he was running, and what people were saying online about this historical event?
I think, like most people, I was so impressed by our former president. I was like, wow, he is really something, well educated, well spoken, all these things that would make a person proud. So, of course, seeing people call him a boy, a coon, a jungle bunny, was definitely disheartening. I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it now. Granted, any public figure is fair game, but when you throw race into it, it changes everything. And that was the worst part of it.
Over the years, during his whole presidency, we also saw that this thing kept coming back again and again. Could you just talk a little bit more about what you noticed as the years went on, how people behaved towards the presidency of Barack Obama?
I feel like they viewed it as if it weren't real. It's like, oh, he's just holding the space here. And, we're going to insult him as much as we can because he's not our president, so to speak. And he's Black and he can't possibly be our president, as if he weren't qualified because he was Black. That was the main insult to me.
So I'm just going to read a couple of the comments from your book that you noticed that were presented about Obama. So this one is from 2009. We are being blacked to death. Everywhere you turn, the media is worshiping the half-breed. Posted by Rebecca Rog 3, newsaol.com, January 27th, 2009. So this is pretty much an online site where you could see any of this.
They were among the worst that I found. There were many, but it seemed like there wasn't any form of moderation at all. They just kind of went for it.
And I'm just going to read one more. This one is from the New York Daily News. Is this what people want? Does anyone want this race baiting and his homely racist mug in the White House? Here is Obama. Here's Barack's mantra. My name is Barack Obama. Because I am part black, you are not allowed to ask me any hard questions. If you do, I will whine and cry, for I am weak. You're not allowed to question my wife's anti-patriotic views, even though she went to Ivy League schools on affirmative action pass paid for by your tax dollars. You are not allowed to question that I sat in the equivalent of this black KKK church for 20 years and associated with every anti-white wacko, such as Reverend Wright and Louis Farrakhan and Sharpton, just to name a few. You will ignore it because it's okay to be a black racist and you should accept that, but it is wrong for anyone else to question. You are not allowed to turn your thermostat past 72 degrees, drive an SUV, and you cannot eat more than someone from India because we need to care about the United Nations and what? That's a lot for just one posting.
Oh yeah, there's more. There's much more and much longer. Wow, it's hard to follow that. I mean, all of that probably had nothing to do with the story. Nothing at all. And people go off topic so much. It's like, oh, let me hurry up and get it in. Let me hurry up. Okay, oh, add this, add that. Throw everything in but the kitchen sink. Because I know it'll be published. And I'll get to see it. And I'll get the attention that I crave. And people will follow me. Because people believe the same thing that I believe. And that's what happens online.
Yeah. And so also you made a point of how the people who write this stuff don't spell very well, or they...
Well, that's a whole different story. That was one of the first things that I noticed. So we know that when we type quickly, as we all do, we have a few typos and all that kind of stuff. But online, it seems that much worse, and it makes it seem like people aren't educated, which in fact they might be, but it's like, oh my God, I've got to get this hatred out so much that I just need to throw it out there. I actually equated it to projectile vomiting. Because, oh my God, let me get it out. It's like, okay, it's out. Let me press enter, and I can be rid of it.
And so you also said something about the fact that a lot of these comments seem to be from male commenters. Could you just talk a little bit about?
Well, certainly the comments against women often are. Well, I have a chapter about black women. And some of the comments that I included in the book have to do with stories that were about women, say, making bad choices. That's actually the name of the chapter, Black Women, Bad Choices. And some of the men go after women for, their choices in mates. For some reason, black women are criticized the most for the mates we choose, for the number of children we have, what we do with our hair, what we have on, everything. And when the story seems to be about a relationship, people just go nuts. A lot of men have the nerve to tell us, what we should be doing as women in order to keep men, in order to get men, and then sometimes the men, black men will chime in, telling us that, yeah, well, they're right, you did this or you did that, you'll be in a relationship with anybody because you're so desperate, things like that.
And it's interesting because they'll announce, I'm a black man.
That's right. They will. Yeah. But I gotta chastise the black women, and this is what you do. You go after, the men with the sneakers and the gold and the money and all that, and here I'm a plumber or whatever, and you won't even talk to me.
So a lot of pathos gets
Oh yeah. But it's almost like the airing of dirty laundry, like, instead of having a conversation with us, you're gonna put it out there with some of the worst comments ever, and you don't know who's saying it, but you're basically in agreement with them, and that really doesn't make us feel that much better.
And it's interesting interesting because they'll announce, I'm a black man.
That's
man,
right.
But I'll
They
agree
will.
with,
They will.
yeah.
But I gotta chastise the black women, and this is what you do. You go after, the men with the sneakers and the gold and the money and all that. And here I'm a plumber or whatever, and you won't even talk to me.
So a lot of pathos gets
Oh
worked
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah. But it's almost like the airing of dirty laundry. Like, instead of like having a conversation with us, you're gonna put it out there with some of the worst comments ever, and you don't know who's saying it, but you're basically in agreement with them, and that really doesn't make us feel that much better.
So I know that a lot of women are getting harassed online, and a lot of them are hesitant to stay online, and so a lot of their voices are leaving, in fact, the internet because they can't take the harassment that they're getting. Could you just talk a little bit about how we're losing some of the voices that might be important to hear online because of this fear of, personal fear, actually?
Right. Well, I know that journalists, a lot of women journalists, have comments that attack them. Some, like Wendy Thomas, who used to be at the Commercial Appeal, she used to get comments so badly that she had to have a police escort when she went home. They wanted to lock her up in a storage shed or something like that, and so she was scared for her family. And she told me, she says, when I write a story, I tell them, don't read the comments. Whoever the subject of the story is, I tell them, don't read the comments because it's just not worth it. But the thing is for people who have been attacked, they're so fearful that they'll just shut down and they don't want to come back on. And I almost can't blame them. It's like their social media footprint just completely disappears. That's how bad it's gotten. And the danger in that is, like Ingrid said, this may be a voice that is really important and that we should be hearing, but because they have been attacked so much that they're fearful and they don't want to do it anymore.
And there's a friend of mine, Michelle Ferrier, and she actually was a newspaper columnist at a paper in Virginia somewhere, I forget, Florida somewhere. And she was writing about some innocuous topic like my home, my garden, my family, and it ended up that she actually had to leave the paper because the comments just kept getting worse and worse, and there was no police protection. The police said that you had to identify, and this doesn't rise to the level of violence. And so she wondered what she would have to do, or what would have to happen to her to get some police protection. Can you speak a little bit about the police angle of this from more than one? We'll get to the other part, but the police angle of not being able to protect anyone because of this speech.
Well, in the book, I interviewed someone from an anti-defamation league. And the reality about threats online is you really have to prove it. You have to prove that you're going to be physically harmed. And the intent is there. It may be an empty threat, but they really won't help you unless they deem it bad enough for them to get involved. So even if it hurts your feelings, even if you're just absolutely disgusted by it, they won't really do anything about it, so the police aren't going to do anything about it either.
And then there was another case, a woman named Anita Richards, and she was a technology person, technologist, and she was at a technology conference, overheard two men saying some negative comments about women, and she kind of outed them on Twitter. And what happened to her was that there was a whole community of trolls that came down on her so hard. You know, they threatened her with rape, they threatened her with dismemberment, they threatened her with all these kinds of things. And this woman, who really had something to offer, a voice for young women interested in technology, and it ended up that she has gone offline and I have yet to see her return. And so we're kind of losing these people who can have an important impact, at least integrating and having more women get into technology, but we're not going to have that because when women do get into technology, they often don't have that kind of support in that backing.
I really don't know what it's going to take to change this. I would hope that people don't erase their social media footprint. It's probably best, though, not to engage at this point because it's just going to get worse for them.
So who is doing this trolling and hating online? Who are the people? What have you found out about the people who are actually writing these comments?
People who are sitting in their homes and they don't go out much. Sitting in the dark, sending out comments at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when they're supposed to be asleep, because that's when they get their best thoughts. That's when they get their best thoughts. And it's hard to say really who it is, because one point that I make in the book is that sometimes Black people are the ones making the comments, and they're doing it because they want the attention. They're doing it because they want to see what kind of reaction they'll get. So they too are trolls as well. Mainly people just want to say the worst possible things that they can. And if they can get away with doing it under the cover of being anonymous, they'll keep doing it.
You have a whole chapter about police. And I'm just going to read this one, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about what you found out about the police commenting online. When is the Black race as a whole going to start taking responsibility for their own actions, their own problems, and their own murder rate? Oh, I'm sorry, it's our problem. Humanity's problem. Damn well, you wanted your own Black collages, your own Black Miss America pageant, and even your own Black entertainment TV. Explain to me again why I should give a SHIT why you African Americans splinter the world for yourselves, but expect us to help and give support and money to your issues. Sorry, you made them, you deal with them. And that was, again, the New York Daily News. But tell me what you found out about the police comments. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. All right, so that chapter is about all of the things that have happened with young men and, Trayvon Martin and all the shootings. That was hard to compile because at the time I had, did I get all of them in? Trayvon Martin, is this one, that one? And it was upsetting that I had to do that, but I knew that it was relevant to the topic. But probably the worst thing that I found out, and this was through Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and he's actually interviewed in the book, and he told me about a website called The Rant. And those are police officers who have a website of their own, and they post racist comments there. And I was so shocked, I couldn't believe it. And so they're doing this at night, or doing it even during the day, and they walk amongst their colleagues who are Black, and they're doing this, and I guess they get some sort of satisfaction.
So we're in this place where this kind of thing has become normal. It's been normalized, this kind of behavior, and as a matter of fact, we've sort of reached a tipping point, and it's gotten to the point that women, news organizations, and bloggers don't want to deal with the rants and retorts online. And blogger Andrew Sullivan shut down his comments because the discourse was so negative. So did Popular Science, Recode, Mike, The Week, Reuters. So it seems like, are we at a tipping point where people are realizing that these comments are not necessarily good for the reader or good for the news organization?
They're certainly not good for the news organization, because what happens is, even though the terms of agreement often say, anything that you post is your own content, we're not responsible. But if it's published on a news website, people are going to think that you are that you're agreeable to what's being posted, and that's where I think the largest backlash comes in, because it's like, so wait, you're agreeing with these people, you're allowing these comments to be posted on your website, so you must be part of this. And I'm sure that was unexpected.
Well, also, when you look at this, according to one survey, there's a decrease in trust because of the uncivil comments, and the articles serve to lower esteem of the publication. And we're also in a period where we have all of this so-called fake news. Do you think that all of this trolling and all of this horrific commenting has led us to a point where news and information that's truthful and factual is less trusted because of the comment section?
Definitely. Just look at the outcome of the current election. Well, the previous election. Comments had a lot to do with that. And if you listen to the current president, the comments, he sounds like a walking, talking online comment, actually. His language is like an online comment. So that's pretty scary. But basically what it's saying is that's okay. It's okay to talk like this. It's okay to say whatever you want and treat people, just immorally.